Hello, Jigs and Ghouls. Today we have a 2 for 1 and we have a theme. We have the theme of road trip with Maniacs. And for the first book, I'll go for Jack Kerouac's On the Road, which, yes, it's a weird choice. And I have started reading this book last August. After, I don't know, 80 pages, I put it on hold and then returned to read this year so I can finish it. A funny story why I read this one, because some years ago I have bought a book called Movement Down Under or Movement Down Below by Nick Mamatas, which is a horror novel where Jack Kerouac meets Cthulhu. And I want to read it, but before doing that, I want to have an idea of who this Kerouac guy is. I know he's a classic author of sorts, so I found On the Road and I say, you know what, it's a classic, get it and read it. And yeah, I do not like this book, and I truly believe that this book didn't age well at all. On the Road by Jack Kerouac is a classic, and basically it is a story of a toxic friendship in an era where people want to get over the wounds, the psychic trauma of World War II or the Great Depression before it. And it doesn't show in this book. That's my impression of it. So we have this author who is called Soul Paradise. He lives in New York. He's just divorced, and he meets this weird guy called Dean Moriarty, who is cuckoo. He is very intense. He's constantly on the move. He's chasing women, and they travel together. They do a lot of travels from New York to San Francisco and vice versa. And it's basically the story of 4 road trips they do along with their friends. Of course, this is based on Jack Kerouac's life. He did those things. I think in the original version he doesn't use these names, so Soul Paradise is Jack Kerouac, and cannot recall who the Dean Moriarty guy is. I mean, okay, it's just a quick review, okay? There are probably much better reviews by people better suited to do these videos on YouTube. And after all, it's a 70-year-old book. And judging from the 1-star reviews you get for it on Goodreads, yeah, it's not that well liked, at least in the booktube crowd. So they are traveling to Erfurt and they are trying to pick up girls. They get drunk, they do drugs, they meet other authors who are weirdos, they like them, they're drinkers, adulterers, drug users, whatever. What makes this book a bit hard to read is how untraditional the story is, how there's not a 3-act structure or something, it's just how things happened. And I get that back in its era, this book was very transgressive and very raw, and actually showed a real part of life. This life of beatniks traveling around the country, living day to day, doing whatever odd jobs they could do, hitchhiking, jumping on trains, all this sort of stuff. And yeah, that's kind of interesting in a way. That's an impression of an era, and that's really great. But reading this book 70 years after the events happened, after, well, this book was published, I believe, in 1951, was first published in 1957, but the events took place back in 1948. So yeah, has grown very old, and in a very bad way. It was transgressive when it was written, but nowadays it's outdated, and there is at least one part to insult every modern reader. I mean, there are a lot of racial epithets, homophobia, racism, some very bad takes, and for those of you who are like, oh, you dumb snowflakes, it's a book written in the 40s. So that's how people speak. Yes, there is also some grown-ass men constantly telling each other how attractive they find underage girls, and they're even having intercourse with a couple of them. Yeah, there is something to make everybody feel bad and that this book is outdated. And you know what really saves this book, and I can understand why it's a classic, is the writing of Jack Kerouac. Early on, there is this part where he's traveling from New York to San Francisco, taking the train, and he first sees the Appalachians, and the way that Kerouac describes that scene is just breathtaking. And there is a lot of great prose in this book. I cannot recall, some critics said that On the Road is typing, not writing, and even if it's so, then this Kerouac guy sure knows how to type. So you can always get this idea. There is a lot of there's not the prose not static. It reflects the story. Sometimes we have this very romantic, whimsical view of the USA. Then we get some friends in writing as him, Sal and Dean and their friends, or Marilu, or their women that they're with them are partying. So there is always some motion. It's very well written, and I think it's worth reading if you are interested in the academics, its literary value, and how important it was for its era. But if you read it as a story set with modern stars stuff, no, it's not. This book is definitely not good nowadays. The lack of structured story, I guess, makes it very hard to read. Basically, the ending comes a bit late because it's about toxic friendship, but I don't think that the main character understands that, or maybe he does very late, and the way it pays off, it's just, it's very. That's a problem with trying to be too realistic. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't tell the story right. So yeah, this book, disappointment. And speaking of traveling around with maniacs, I'll give you what you expected. Joyride by Jack Ketchum. That's I've read quite a few Jack Ketchum novels, as you may have known if you're watching this channel. And Joyride was, I was like, it was one of the novels I have yet to read, so I took the chance and went for it. This is the Amazon edition, and it was first published in 1995. What's the story in Joyride? In Joyride, we have a couple, Carol and her lover, Lee, who are sick and tired of Carol's ex-husband, who is very abusive, so they decide to murder him. They set up everything for the murder, but they just don't account for one detail. You see, there is a witness to the crime. There is this guy called Wayne, who is a sick fuck, and he sees the murder, and instead of being like, oh, I have to tell the police, he always had this violent urges inside him, so he decides to meet those two people he saw murdering someone and take them out for a joyride where he plans to commit murders because he feels they are his kindred souls. And if you know Jack Ketchum, you know that his books are very violent. He has a very sparse writing style, small chapters, small sentences, very fast paced, very brisk. So we have these three main characters, as well as a police officer trying to investigate the death of the abusive husband. And he was the police officer that Carl went to when her husband did some very nasty things to her. So, he wants the best for Carl. His life is also not great, so you get the idea. And since it's a Jack Ketchum novel, there is a sense of escalation as it starts very slow. It starts with a murder, but very slow, and then it ramps up to total mayhem. And he goes there, and as the pages progress on and on, stuff here become more and more gruesome. There are coding warnings for almost everything, but you know what? It's an extreme horror novel. There will be a lot of nasty stuff, so it's not a good idea to read this if you care about any sort of content warning, because it's probably in here. So what happens is that that's in the synopsis, takes its time, he plans to abduct them and go out on a road trip as he is killing people. And I was not that impressed with the book, alright? I'll be honest about this. I think that one of the main issues for me was that none of the characters that were being set up throughout this book was sympathetic to me. I didn't care about if they live or die, which is always a minus if you want to build tension about what will happen to them. The violence is alright. That is wrong. That sounds very wrong saying that, but you know, you read these books for the mayhem, and the mayhem feels very, I won't say mild or lukewarm, because there are some very nasty stuff, and Ketchum doesn't shy away. It just lacks the oomph factor, the extra mile in a book like that, because it's important to have some interesting kills in a book like that. And I felt that, yes, most of the kills were very fast. It was more about the reality of acting that way for somebody instead of, you know, going full sadistic. There is some interesting violence here, but also, I don't know, really, that's I didn't feel this book. It was very well written and it was quite interesting, but yeah, I have read much better Jack Ketchum novels, to be honest. I just couldn't connect with the characters, which is a big thing. I mean, if I can read The Lost and actually connect with the killer there, what's his name? Yeah, I want to connect with somebody in this book, and I think the police officer was the sympathetic character here. He was the one you can find as the reader surrogate, but the main three characters were not that sympathetic, and when we get into their backgrounds and see why they're the way they are, it starts to make sense, but up to that point you haven't grown close to them. If the details about what has happened in the past were earlier on the book, yes, I would love this, but this book also includes a novella in there, with Species, which is, holy fuck, that novella is sick. Alright, content warning for just mentioning what the plot of this novella is, because this novella is about a couple who likes to, alright, I'll say this like, you know, like all those outrage YouTubers do, where they're trying to evade bad words that will kill their chances with the algorithm. So they find girls in their teens and they make movies with them. You know, it starts with the woman of the couple dragging her 13-year-old sister for her husband to make the film, and it goes very wrong. And then as it progresses, we see how their crimes affect their lives and what happens to them. It's very sick. It's a very sick novella, and I got that Ketchum nastiness. I so much crave that was one of those sick novellas. So if you're in this kind of stuff, give it a read. If you're not, just read Joyride. Alright, it was very intense and very interesting. I didn't say that I sympathized with the main characters because I was not supposed to, but I could actually feel them. Something that the novel Joyride didn't make me do. So yeah, the With Spaces was definitely a great read. Joyride was not my cup of tea. I think it was my second least favorite Jack Ketchum novel of the ones I've read. My least favorite was Old Flames. I have not yet read every Jack Ketchum novel though, so definitely that doesn't mean it's the worst of his entire body of work. It might as well be mid-tier, and I have not read the less good, like, I don't know, Cover or Strugglehold. So yeah, you get the idea. I was not that enthused. That was my two reviews, my two-in-one for road tripping with Maniacs. If you read any of these books or you have any suggestions of a similar nature of, running around with some unhinged people, leave a comment below. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Thank you for watching and stay spooky.